Okay, so I just came back from a 2-week trip to Bangladesh, my home country that I was born in, and I haven't been back in like over 10 years. And what I want to do is, in this video, walk you through my experience of it. First, I want to give you like my general vibe of Bangladesh, like what, like a mental image of what it's kind of like. So here in Canada, the streets are pretty like calm and tame. You know, there's traffic, but like it's not like that bad. But as soon as I land to Bangladesh and we're walking down the street, I was like, oh my God, it's like high stimulation. Imagine walking down the street where it's towards the people, just everywhere. The air's a little smoggy. There's traffic left and right, honk, and it's just intense. It's like high stimulation. Like when you're walking down the street and you're like, oh my God, there's just so much happening, what's going on, right? It's almost like slight anxiety, just being in the streets and like just being aware of everything and just so much stimulation happening. So getting used to that took a minute. So that's like my impression of Bangladesh as soon as I landed. And then from there, basically 10 days of seeing family and sightseeing nonstop. And here are a few things that I kind of reflected on. Number one is this. I feel like everyone who lives in the Western world should visit a third world country for like 2 weeks. Because like, here's the thing, I'm in Canada, right? And I'm only seeing the problems that are right now in front of me. You know, rent, payment, social media, and then social justice issues on social media, and then the culture wars and all these things, right? And then in Bangladesh, I'm driving down the street and there's a 6-year-old girl coming up to the window of my car begging me for change, who's literally walking car to car in one of the most highest density country in the world with traffic that's just absolutely dangerous to be walking around in. Or there's like a beggar with no hands coming up to you, knocking on your window, being like, please give me change, right? And it really made me think as soon as I came back, like, whoa, I thought my problems were big, but there's some real problems happening out there in the world. It really made my first world problem actually feel like a first world problem. Like I remember waiting for an Uber after the mall and there was a kid that came up to us and like he was like begging for change. And I'm like, oh, like where's your mom? Right? Like where's your mom? And I look over and I see a lady in the distance staring at us. She's wearing a burqa. She's looking at us and I'm like, why is she staring at us? And I look over and I'm like, oh, that's the mom of this kid that's begging us for change. She literally told her kid, hey, go up to those people over there because they seem like they have money and ask them for change. When do you see that here in Canada? Like if you did that here in Canada, child custody, whatever the hell social service would be called on and you'd probably go to jail. Again, it just puts a lot of perspective to the problems we have here and the stuff we take for granted. There's one point we were driving and you know, I'm looking out the window because I love staring at people. Don't ask why, I just love staring at people. And I would look at rickshaw drivers and I remember staring at one of them and I'm like, holy crap, like how different is your life compared to mine? It became really evident to me that, wow, I am actually very, very privileged. Okay, so now I gotta talk to you about like the driving and traffic. So here's some videos of the traffic, okay? So you can see that it's very intense. Like, how do I even describe it? It's like hardcore. Like if you can drive in a country like Bangladesh, if you can drive there, I'm pretty sure you can drive anywhere in the world because there are no rules almost. Basically, it's wherever you see a gap, just squeeze your car into it. Here, like in Canada, when you like cut someone off, there's generally distance whenever you cut someone off. But there's no distance. Your car is inches to inches from one another. You're literally looking out the window, you're like, holy crap, I'm about to get in an accident, holy crap, because they come so close to you. But the locals there, or even the drivers there, they're like, yeah, this is normal. Yeah, like who cares? They're not gonna crash into you. We're safe. And I'm like, oh my God, we're literally about to hit that car. Like we're literally about to bump them. And everyone's finding every little tight gap to fit in. Honking is not a bad thing there. It's just the way of the roads. It's the language of the road. So everyone is like honking, honk, 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 honk. Here, if you honk, people are like, oh my God, what happened? Oh my God, what happened, right? There, if you honk, it's more like, by the way, I'm coming through, watch out, I'm coming through, watch out, I'm coming through, watch out. And I remember one point, we're driving on the wrong side of the road for for like kilometers and kilometers on end, and all these cars are incoming, and I'm like, oh my God, this feels so illegal. But over there, it's so normal. And there's so many rickshaws and what's called CNGs everywhere, trying to fit into every gap, and then your car's constantly brake, go, honk, 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 honk. And oh my God, the traffic, I remember getting stuck in 2 hours of traffic. Like here in Toronto, let's say it's rush hour, you're stuck in traffic, you're on the Gardner. Maybe you're just stuck in traffic for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And we're like, oh my God, this feels forever. There, you're stuck in traffic for like 2 hours and 30 minutes. Like it is intense. And I remember this one scene, and I'll post a clip over here. We're driving next to a bus, and we wanted to cut off the bus, right? Get into the gap in front of them. But the bus wouldn't let us get in. And so the bus was like inches and inches away from the bus in front of it to close any little gap so no one would cut in front of it. And if, like, look at this clip, just watch. Like, how do you feel watching this? Okay, so here's the thing. Here in Canada, I kind of feel like middle class. There, I felt like a higher middle class, if not an upper class person. Not because I technically would make more money there or anything. In fact, I probably might make less. The dollar and the money goes a long way. So for example, my family is pretty well off in Bangladesh, and so we had a house help. So we have people in our houses cooking, cleaning, laundry, washing dishes, all that for us. So you literally don't even have to lift a finger. It's like having a personal butler for you for whatever you need. And the thing is, they're very cheap because again, it's Bangladesh, it's a third world country, so you barely pay them much. And on top of that, you have drivers driving you around. We had, like, one of my cousins, they gave us their car for the entire week. And so we want to go shopping, call up the driver, and we go into the car, we go to the mall, and the driver just waits for us. And then we come back home, the driver waits for us. And we go to that person's home, and the driver drives us there and waits for us, right? It's better than Uber, basically. And on top of that, like, you're not lifting things. Like, laborious things are not there for you to do. So if you have a suitcase you need to lift upstairs, you always have a helper to lift things for you. Like, general labor is not a thing if you're an upper middle class or a high class. At first I was like, oh my God, I feel so bad for giving you this dish to wash for me. Oh my God, I feel so bad for giving you this suitcase to lift up for me. Oh my God, I'm giving you all this laborious work. I felt so bad. After a couple days, I was like, oh, this is just the way it is. And I remember like coming back from the trip and in Toronto, the Pearson airport, and I called an Uber, and the Uber came and I had a suitcase. And the Uber driver's like, yeah, fit the suitcase in the back. And I had to personally lift the suitcase myself and put it in the back of a car. I felt poor. It was like a reverse culture shock. I remember I was on the airplane and the kid next to me, he was a student trying to move to Canada and studying in Canada for software engineering. And his dad came to Canada for the first time. And he told me that his dad saw someone on the street and the dad told him, oh my God, did you see that? There's an old person driving themselves around. Before me would be like, yeah, well, duh, you drive yourself around. But now experiencing Bangladesh for like 2 weeks, I get why he would say something like that. Because I've seen Bangladesh, I'm like, I get why you would feel that way. In fact, this goes to a larger conversation. Like, if you're like upper middle class in Bangladesh and you're like 40, 45, and you know, you have house help, you have drivers there for you, and you're pretty well off and you have respected and you have a good government job, coming to Canada will feel like a big downgrade because you kind of live like a king there. Now, you know, the streets are dirty and there's poverty around and all that, but like if you're upper middle class or high class, like you live pretty much like a king. And then on top of that, like if you're trying to immigrate to Canada, not only will you not have the help here, but it's harder to adapt to a new culture if you're older generally. And on top of that, your credentials from the past, you might have a hi-fi, cool, next level job back home, but then those skills and experiences won't transfer equivalently back into Canada. And so now you have to take these laborious jobs like security guards and warehouse workers. And so psychologically, it's like, wow, I came from like a very well-respected job with all these helpers around me, all these drivers around me. I can get whatever I want at like a snap of a finger, to now working a laborious job where I have to lift my own suitcase. Like, I get it now. Like, I get why it would feel like a downgrade. And it made me even personally think like, wait, why did my parents leave a country like this to come here? Now, obviously, you know, if you want freedom, you're worried about government, you're an asylum seeker, or like you're trying to escape corruption or whatever, like there's always those good reasons. But if you're generally well off and you're not faced with a lot of those problems and you try to come here, it would feel like a downgrade. If you're like younger and then you want to immigrate to Canada, that's probably a better option, because when you're younger, you probably don't have like all that status and stuff in Bangladesh, and you're still working on that. So you're okay to start from zero. And you're younger, so you can adapt to the new culture and the language and the ways of the new world, whatever the hell you want to call it, so much easier. So since the last time I went to Bangladesh, it's been like 10 years, and man, they have like developed. You know, going to this trip, I was nervous because of my experience 10 years ago, and especially, and like, let me tell you what happened 10 years ago. You'd walk outside, and the smog was so intense that if you literally walked outside for 5 minutes without a mask, your boogers would turn black. Like, I remember walking outside, 5-10 minutes, blazing hot, come back, you know, and then, you know, you use the washroom and you blow your nose, and it's like black stuff that like on the sink. I remember drinking the water and I was like, oh my God, it tastes like fish. Mosquitoes were everywhere. So you sleep. I remember my brother slept, woke up the next day, looked at his leg, and there was like red bumps everywhere down his leg. So going to this trip this time around, I was nervous about all those different things. Right away, a couple days into this trip, I was like, oh my God, what is happening here? First, like, there's barely any smog now, and apparently the reason for that is because the government put in laws where you have to use like gas-powered engines or something like that instead of diesel. The roads are a lot more cleaner. I remember last time, 10 years ago, I'd walk down the street and you just smell like sewage. Like, you'd see the sewage and you smell it. But now I didn't see the sewage and I didn't smell it, which is really nice. On top of that, you know, they have Ubers driving around places now, and then they have these like what's called flyovers or something, like bridges above the regular traffic where like it's like a highway on a bridge and you can go from one place to another so much faster. And before they didn't have that, so you'd be stuck in traffic for so long. And on top of that, they ended up building a subway, or not a subway, but like a train system as well in Bangladesh. And I remember looking at all that, I'm like, wow, this place is cleaner, the air is cleaner, the transportation is better, there's Uber, I feel a lot more safer walking down the streets. And here's the interesting thing, 10 years ago I'd walk down the street and I would walk around and everyone would stare at me because it's very obvious to them that I was a foreigner, like I was Canadian visiting Bangladesh. And so I remember walking down the street and people would just like stare, and I wasn't used to the staring. And so I would feel very uncomfortable. But this time around, no one stared at me, no one gave a shit about me, no one cared about me. It was like, it was like humbling, like, oh, I'm not special, but it's also like, oh, I'm not special, you know? When we were driving to places we didn't know where to go, we obviously had to ask for directions, and so the drivers would reach out, like pull down their window, call over a rickshaw driver and be like, hey, where is this? And then the rickshaw driver would give directions. But what's interesting is that no one would say thank you, please and thank you. You know, here in Canada, like when you hold a door for someone, you generally say thank you and you smile, you make eye contact. And then they reply, you're welcome, eye contact, and smile. Like, generally when you're walking in the street level, I'm not saying when you're with family and upper class, but generally when you're walking on the street and you're in day-to-day life, there isn't a lot of thank you and you're welcome. And at first I remember, I was so shocked by that. Yeah, I remember the driver asking directions, he got the directions he needed, and he's like, all right, and drove away. And I'm like, whoa, like, you're not gonna say thank you? Like, what the hell? And I asked a friend of mine, like, why is that the case? And he was like, he said something interesting. He's like, you know, we've seen years of corruption, we've been living in poverty, everything, and it just kind of numbs you to a lot of things. And so trust is a little low. And so needingness to be soft around the edges isn't necessarily there. You're a lot more harder around the edges. Man, like, shopping's a little different there, okay? So I remember going to the shop to buy toys as a gift, and I'm walking the shop, I'm like, hey, where are your monster trucks? And he was like, over there. And he followed us there, right? I'm like, okay, cool, he showed us the way. But then the guy wouldn't leave us. Like, he'd always be behind us watching everything we do. And at first I was like, what the hell? Like, what are you doing? Why are you watching us? And after visiting a bunch of stores, I'm like, oh wait, this is just the normal thing to do here. So then one day I wanted to buy a lot of stuff because obviously the clothes is much cheaper and everything. So I wanted to go on like a shopping binge, right? And I went to this shop to buy clothes, and I knew the kid there, he was gonna follow me around the store. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna like take advantage of this. And so I'm walking around the store, he's like personally following me, and I'm like, hey, find me this size for this, find me that size for this, hey, carry this, carry that, carry this, all right, looking for this, how much is that, boom, 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 boom. I just like kind of took advantage of the fact that he was there to be my helper, not just like a retail associate. And so he would carry the stuff for me, he would find the sizes for me, he would look for other options for me, and he was like very, very helpful. I was like, wow, like I feel like a king here, like this is awesome. And so I'm grabbing a bunch of stuff, throwing his way, going to the fitting room, he's holding the stuff for me outside the fitting room. I'm like, hey, give me this, and I hold this, boom, 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 right? It was really, really nice. And I felt like I was taking advantage of that, like I was taking advantage of the poor kid. But like, that's how it's done there. Like, that's how it's done. And then I come here, and then I go to like H&M, for example, to buy some pants, and I have to find someone to help me. I'll be like, where's this? And they're like, oh, over there. But they're not looking for it for me. They're not like walking around and holding things for me. And I'm like, wow, like it kind of feels like a downgrade. And this is speaking from my personal experience. I'm not sure if this is the actual way it works, but this is just what I've kind of observed. There was clearly a divide between the classes. When I looked around, there were like two classes. There was the labor class, and then there was like the office job corporate class, right? The labor class were like a lot of the rickshaw drivers, the CNGs, the car drivers, the people doing the manual jobs, the garment workers, right? And these people, they generally lived in a lot more poverty. Their skin was darker because they'd be outside. I'm assuming because they're outside in the sun working all day. Their teeth are a lot more yellow because I guess they can't afford like dental hygiene and everything. And you can tell like they looked lower class. It sounds really bad to say, but you generally, when you walk around, like can tell like who's higher and lower class. Then there's like, so that's the lower class. But then there's like the middle upper class. These people tend to be more polished. Like they would generally have more fairer skin tone, kind of like mine. They would use more polite language and be more articulate. They generally had drivers, and so they would be sitting in cars, or they would sit in the back of rickshaws and CNGs. They worked in more corporate jobs, and one of my cousins, he's very well connected in Bangladesh, and he worked for the government and everything, and so because of that, he had a certain sticker he can put on the windshield of his car, and then his car had like this little horn thing at the front of it. And that basically indicated that he was a person of status in the country. So whenever he'd go to checkpoints, he'd be easily put through. And people would generally give him the right of way. It just showcased a sense of status. And it's interesting, I was thinking about this. Again, like I said to you, the lower class generally had like darker skin. And you know how here in the West, it's like, oh my God, that skin lightening ointment, that's so racist, that's so bad, we shouldn't be doing that. When I stepped outside of that Canadian bubble and then went to Bangladesh, I can see why people want to make their skin more fairer, because my assumption is this is based on my observation. I don't actually know, but when you're darker skin, you're generally a lower class because you're probably going to be out in the sun doing labor and stuff, right? And so it's not seen as pretty or elegant, and so that's why people use that skin fairing lotion thingy. So you know how on the West it's like individualism, and then on the East it's like collectivism? When I'm in Bangladesh for 2 weeks, I'm in the depths of collectivism. So here's how East is different. As soon as we go there, there's like 10 different family members offering us their home for them to stay. There's another family member who's like, hey, have my driver for the entire week. Then throughout the trip, we have family members calling us, hey, are you okay? Are you good? Are you checking in? Are you well, right? Then there's another family that's like, hey, why are you staying with them? Instead, stay with us for the week because like we want to see you, right? You get invited to their home to eat, and there's food, making sure to take care of. Even when you're eating the food, they want to make sure that you're eating right, so they'll always check your plate, like, hey, you didn't take much, take more. Hey, what can we do for you? Do you want cha? Let me grab this for you, let me do this for you, boom, 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 right? Community and family is a really big thing. Felt like there was like a family net that was all around me. But now that I'm here in Canada, I don't have much family here, so I don't get those calls as much, and I don't get to see my family as much. And I almost feel like here, it's because of it's more individualistic, family connectiveness is less. Like for example, there in Bangladesh, generally speaking, you and your wife, you generally live with your mom and dad in the same household. Like that's just a very common thing. And so naturally you have a lot of people around you. But here, it's like you graduate, you get a job, and even if you're single, just go live on your own. And then you find a girlfriend and you marry them, and you live on your own away from your mom and dad. There, like, generally speaking, at least what I think right now, is that if you live on your own, you're kind of betraying the family. Like, what is wrong with you? Why are you living on your own? That's not good. You gotta live with your family. It's like you're betraying the family. I remember I was on the plane ride back to Canada, and this Hindu 23-year-old guy was sitting next to me from Nepal. And so we were talking about dating. And the guy sitting on his right, I was sitting on his left. The guy sitting on his right is like, hey, I have a girlfriend and she's Filipino. So it's the Bengali guy dating a Filipino. Then the Hindu guy was like, wait, why are you dating someone outside of the culture and you should be dating and seeing people because your family wants that. Think about your family first. If your family doesn't approve, you should not be doing this, because then you're not making them happy. Like, you gotta do things for the family. Like, he was so adamant, do it for the family, do it for the family, do it for the family. And it just goes to show like how different the mindset is with like the East versus the West. It's weird. I feel like because I was born there, but I was raised here in Canada, I have like a dual identity. Going back to Bangladesh, seeing all the family that I had there, and all the different life there, completely different. And then the paradigm of life is different here. So it's so weird. After the entire trip, I feel like I have like two identities. That back there in Bangladesh and this here in Canada. Like, I remember visiting a village, and basically the village is basically where my dad's dad was raised. And then he moved to the city, right? So it's kind of like, in a weird way, like the roots of where I came from. Seeing the village, seeing the kids there, seeing the different people there, seeing the poverty there, being told that, hey, that house over there belonged to your grandfather, but it now belongs to your dad. Soon, Alif, that house over there in this village, out in the outskirts of Chittagong, that house is gonna belong to you. I just sat there listening to that thinking, wait, what the hell? I have a building in this village, in this country, thousands of kilometers away from me? What? Like, what? That's when I really felt I had a different identity. So I was talking to a Bengali kid who was about to move to Canada in the airplane on the way to Toronto. And so he's been raised in Canada. And he told me that, the culture in Bangladesh is that you graduate school, you get a job, and then that's when you settle down. So around early 20s is when you settle down, right? You have an apartment, you find a wife, you move in with your family, with your wife, and all these. You settle down early 20s. Then he's like, but in Canada, it's very different. It's like you graduate school, and then you're supposed to make it. And that's when you start, and you're supposed to work on your career and focus on yourself. And then I'm like, yeah, dude, I just want to be a millionaire by 30. And he's like, exactly. That what you just said, Alif, is not there. I thought it was really cool. That was very interesting perspective, because I'm in such a bubble, a Western Canadian bubble, that there are so many other different bubbles and paradigms of life and views all around the world. And I'm in my own bubble thinking that I'm the greatest person in the world or something, but I'm really not. Like, my paradigm of just life and how to operate just completely changed. I'm also way more seeing all the family around me, everyone. It made me think man, here I am focused so much on my career. Marketing, clients, emails, blah, 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 boom, 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 boom. I want to prioritize more family now. Check in on them. When they come over, take care of them. Make them food, do nice things, send them gifts, Instead of just being so career. I almost feel like there's more to life than just working all the time. That was a big thing that I took away. Anyways, that's my experience of Bangladesh. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stuff I didn't cover that I should probably cover, but I'll make another video. If you have any requests for questions, let me know down in the comments. Oh, I'm sick. Or let me know on Instagram. And with that, thanks for watching this video, and I shall talk to you in another video. Peace, peace, peace.